audience here. Anyone who's not here, please speak out. I'm going to reprise a speech that I gave at the Shrine Auditorium in Los Angeles on June 9, 1991. It's been amended, added to, changed about a bit. But it was a speech that essentially honored Gene Roddenberry, who was there that night to receive the plaudits of the audience. Madam Speaker, fellow delegates, sorry, wrong speech. Your Royal Majesty, my lords, honored guests, Janet Cortran, Frida Warrington, Jeff Ryman, Julian Headlong, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, assorted hangers-on, Trekkers, Trekkies, Trekkettes, and other alien life forms. These are the times that try men's souls. The summer soldier and the sunshine patriot. Wait a second, that's not right either. My apologies, folks. With your permission, I'll begin again. Friends, Romulans, Vulcans, lend me your ears. Oh, close, but no cigar. One score and 7 years ago, Gene Roddenberry brought forth upon this planet a new television show conceived in liberty and dedicated to the proposition that all sentient life forms are created equal. We soon became engaged in a great struggle testing whether that show or any other show so conceived and so dedicated could long endure. Well, it did endure. And it gives every indication of enduring for many years to come. That little TV show became a phenomenon. What a show. What a conception. What a daring enterprise. Notice the clever play of words? What an original piece of thinking. A piece of thinking so intelligent and so true that the network nabobs had no inkling of what a Pandora's box they had opened. How could they know that the show they had commissioned, a show they never really understood because it was about morality, and therefore suspect, and also was, in their opinion, perhaps too cerebral? No, definitely too cerebral for them. How could they know it was a show that would seize the imagination of generation upon generation of thinking, feeling humans everywhere? How could all those network vice presidents know what lay in store for them, and fortunately for the world? Remember, these were the guys who had Spock's pointy ears airbrushed back to normalcy in the network press kit photo because they feared he looked too satanic and people wouldn't like him. Star Trek did seize the imagination of many thinking, feeling humans. Perhaps not everywhere, but certainly in enough places to enable the show to survive not one, but two attempts by our network overseers to scuttle what they had loosed upon the airwaves in an attempt to present what they advertised on the TV page of the Los Angeles Times as, quote, action-adventure, unquote, to the great unwashed masses, meaning us, you and me, to the great unwashed masses out there in the boondocks, way out there in that vast television Newton Minnow wasteland. Well, that was then, and this is now. And several generations later, that same cerebral piece of entertainment is still attracting a discerning, ever-growing audience. And guess who's probably claiming credit now for being visionary? Well, read my lips, folks, as George Bush was wont to say. Gene Roddenberry was the visionary and no one else but. Standing here now, I'm reminded of another time that I addressed a gathering of people who care. It was at an Equicon convention in Universal City, California, on April 27, 1987. Star Trek: The Next Generation was in pre-production for its first season on the air, and the natives were restless. Many of the original series' most dedicated fans weren't sure that the show we were making was a show that they wanted to see. Where were Spock and Kirk and Bones and Uhura and Scotty and Chekhov and Janice Rand, the groovy female yeoman, or rather yeoman, and Nurse Christine Chappell? Remember her? You know, the tall, big-eyed, long-legged, elegant drink of water played by, what was her name? Whatever happened to her? I wonder where she is now. She was right there. Anyhow, I went there to reassure everyone that the principles that motivated us were still the same principles, and that freedom and justice and mercy will never perish from the earth. Thank you, Abraham Lincoln. So I spoke a short speech, and here's some of what I said. 20 years ago, we were told that according to Nielsen, nobody was watching. Well, somebody was watching, because we're still here. You were watching. Your friends were watching. Fact is, millions of people were watching. Watching and responding to what our message was then and what it continues to be now. Truth, morality, tolerance, human kindness. Truth, morality, tolerance, human kindness. On television? Damn right, and we're going to do it again. A few minutes ago, when I was introduced to you, I was applauded. Well, somebody else deserves applause. Somebody who really deserves it. You deserve it. You and all the millions of people around the world who, supposedly, weren't watching. You kept our spirit alive. You kept Star Trek alive. You refused to let it die. And that's why I'm here today, to thank you and to applaud you. And I did, I applauded them. Well, folks, that's what I said then. I told the truth. You were the heart of Star Trek. You are the heart of Star Trek. You always will be. Thank goodness for human beings. And speaking of human beings, it's time I got around to why I'm really here at this time. I'm here to pay tribute to the kindest, gentlest, most decent of human beings, a man so forgiving that he never lost his temper with me, no matter how crazily I acted or how much I attempted to get his goat. And I tried everything, believe me. I once stood on his desk while he was frantically rewriting page after page of script so that the hungry maw of our production machine could be satisfied. And I said, faster, Gene, faster. And he wrote faster, despite the fact that he used a No. 2 pencil, and his long, elegant fingers, calloused by years of scriptwriting abuse, bent the wrong way. And how that man could write. He was truly gifted. After that, whenever the shooting company needed more pages, and it always needed more pages, I'd walk into his office without announcing myself and climb up onto his desk. I'd just stand there looking down at him while he wrote. For a while, he tried ignoring me. He'd pretend that I really wasn't there. But I was there and he knew it. And I knew that he knew it. And he knew that I knew that he knew it. Finally, he had an electric latch put on his door to keep me out. A latch controlled by a secret button that was hidden from view in his outer office. Only his secretary, Penny, knew where it was, and she wouldn't tell me. I was frustrated, but not for too long. When she was out one day, I doggedly investigated until I discovered the hidden button that unlatched the office door, and I pressed it. And then I walked into his office while he was writing, and slowly walked past him, pretending not to see him. His office was long and narrow, and he sat in the middle. There was a back door at the far end of the room, and I headed for it. He kept his head down writing while he pretended not to see me. And I exited out the far end of his office without speaking a word. And he let me go without speaking a word. Why didn't he kill me? I guess I'll never know. I was gloating because I outfoxed him. I had obtained entry despite all his precautions. But for years I wondered, was he gloating because he cleverly ignored me and therefore totally frustrated me? I don't know. What I do know is that he never told me. He just let me twist slowly in the wind. One thing I learned from that episode is that Gene had a sense of humor, and that no matter how hard we worked, he was always ready for fun and games. I remember the time when he was the main instigator of a change of identity prank. We were filming the show entitled, What Are Little Girls Made Of? And dear departed Ted Cassidy, that massively tall character actor who played the humongous android Ruck, had come to Gene's office for final makeup and wardrobe approval. We all stood around, craning our necks to look up at Ted while we discussed whether he looked frightening enough, or on the other hand, too frightening. Gene decided to find out for sure. There was a young person, a salesman, in his outer office to see Gene for the purpose of selling him some really cheap suits made in Hong Kong. Gene had Ted Cassidy sit behind Gene's desk and play the role of executive producer. Then the unsuspecting victim was brought in to meet Star Trek creator Gene Roddenberry. This young salesman entered the room and faced this incredible-looking being who rose to greet him, 7 feet tall or thereabouts, totally bald with a large, cadaverous, bony skull, prominent cheekbones and dark, deep-sunken eye sockets, ghastly gray complexion, and wearing a voluminous cassock down much like a medieval monk's hat. "How do you do?" inquired Ted in his deepest, richest, most stentorian tones. He rose to his full height, extended his enormous paw, engulfed the comparatively minuscule hand of his guest, and shook it forcefully, bellowing, "I'm Gene Roddenberry, and these are my trusted associates. Now sit down and tell me all about yourself and your exquisite male fashion products." He leered evilly, and his eyeballs bulged ominously. I don't know what possessed our victim. Surely this Gene Roddenberry must have seemed rather unusual. But the salesman sat down, and after a moment spent collecting what little was left of his thoughts, he proceeded to recount all the merits of his Hong Kong suits. Ted interrupted him to ask if the tailors could make garments to match what he was wearing, but in different colors like fuchsia, mauve, forest green, lavender. The young salesman swallowed nervously, but finally he allowed us how they could do that, although it might cost extra because of the immense amount of fabric that would be required. We all admired our applicant's aplomb, and because of that, he did get an order from Gene for 3 suits later, after we had let him in on the joke. And we decided that Ted's makeup was just perfect. Not too frightening, but frightening enough. After all, while the person he interviewed did tremble noticeably during the interview, at no time did that poor soul leap to his feet, screaming in terror to run out of the room. Later, I formed the opinion that he was probably too frightened to move. So Ted went back to the stage and we went back to work. And we worked very hard that first season of Star Trek. Months on end with never more than a few hours of sleep at night. How exhausted we both became. So exhausted that finally I came unglued at home one night, and my wife Jackie phoned Gene and told him that she was taking me away to Hawaii for a rest cure and to butt out if he knew what was good for him. Gene wisely butted out. But I didn't want to leave, claiming that I had too much to do. Herb Solo, who ran Desilu's television operation, actually had the studio pay for our plane tickets after threatening to fire me if I didn't go. But I was still hanging on. Before I left, I sent a memo to Gene telling him to help dub What Are Little Girls Made Of? I advised him to dub quickly and be willing to compromise. That's a quote. Hopefully, continuing my quote, hopefully you will get this memo after I have left so that no matter how mad you get at me for suggesting that you compromise more, you won't be able to do anything about it. I then went on to say, quote, "Don't send me any nasty wires. Remember, at this point in your career, you need me more than I need you." Little did I know that I had given Gene an idea for a clever way to have some fun at my expense. So off we went to the land of surf, sunsets, and sweet Leilani. And that's when Gene took his revenge upon me. How would you feel, I wonder, if, like me, you were spaced out, totally bonkers, and when you boarded the plane for Hawaii, there was a cold bottle of champagne for Gene waiting, and the creature named Baylock from an episode entitled The Corbomite Maneuver, occupying the seat between you and your wife. And it sat there while the drunk in the seat behind you guffawed loudly in your ear and enveloped you in a cloud of alcoholic fumes. and the pilot refused to take off until the creature was removed from the plane. And the stewardesses got PO'd because they had to pour the champagne for you after putting up with all this nonsense and refused to speak with you during the rest of the trip. And then, to add insult to injury, you had the same two stewardesses on the flight back to LA. And they still wouldn't speak to you. Wait, there's more. Gene, who was a notoriously gentle person, was angry at a certain studio executive. Let's call the guy Bill Heath. Why, you might ask? Because that was his name, I think. Anyhow, there were times that I had to physically restrain gentle Gene from barreling down to Heath's office in order to tear him limb from limb. You see, Gene felt that quality was important. And Bill was carrying out studio policy that quality was not important when compared to costs. And his penny pinching was also endangering the timely delivery of our optical special effects. I think that Gene was worried that our opticals wouldn't be in the shows until much later when they went into reruns. I had taken it upon myself to keep Gene and Desilu Studios' post-production chief apart. I made nice in an attempt to speed delivery of the opticals, even though, in my heart, I had a feeling that Gene was right. Before I left for Aloha Land, I extracted a promise from Gene that he wouldn't do anything about this problem while I was gone. In other words, he wouldn't do what it was he really wanted to do, namely, to violate certain sections of both the California State Penal Code and his by now mortal enemy's anatomy. Otherwise, I said, I'm not going. That was in the fall of 1966, and I still recall that I shook noticeably as I made my threat. Actually, I shook all the time by that time. Well, Gene, being a kindly fellow and incidentally perceiving a golden opportunity to take revenge upon me for standing on his desk, decided to restrain himself. He said, have a wonderful trip, Bob. Get some great R&R and don't worry about a thing. I won't even talk to what's-his-face while you're gone. So I left, but I wasn't totally reassured. On the flight west, every time I thought about the possibility of Gene committing mayhem or upon his adversary at the studio, I'd begin to quiver. Well, there I was at Hanalei Bay on the tropical island of Kauai, the idyllic spot where the beach scenes for the movie South Pacific were filmed. By the end of the second day, my twitching had subsided to no more than once or twice an hour. I was feeling better and was thinking about going native. I was standing in the surf and it was raining. I didn't care. And then on Monday, just before lunch, Jackie waited out and handed me a cablegram. Do not accept Bill Heath's phone call. We can work it out here, signed Gene Roddenberry. I screamed, ran out of the water, up the path to the cliff top, and into the hotel lobby, where another cable awaited me. Disregard last message. Perhaps you had better talk to Heath, signed Gene Roddenberry. By that time, I was frantically placing long-distance calls to LA. Strangely, Gene was out of the office. Next day, I got another cable. Urgent. What did you and Heath decide? I phoned the studio, but everybody had already gone home. I called Gene's house, but he was out for the evening. Now, when I left Los Angeles, it was Friday, and the Galileo 7 episode was finishing its last day of filming, on schedule and under budget for once. On the following Tuesday, the next cable read, relax, all going well, we'll finish Galileo 7 Wednesday. I made another frantic phone call. Gene was out again. I tried Sylvia, my secretary, but she was out too. Then another cable arrived. Quoting it exactly. No problem. Sylvia claims Steve Karabatsos is the father. Steve was working for us at the time as a writer's group consultant. And then I began to smell a rat. Especially after I read the next cable. Still no problem. Pearlstein agrees to defend you. Ed Pearlstein was the studio attorney. There were other urgent telegrams from Gene, but I no longer went for the bait. Instead, I went back into the surf. It continued to rain, and I didn't care. By the time I returned, Gene had lost warp speed and was running on impulse power only. He'd become wasted too. I gloated a little before we shipped him off to Hawaii for the same rescuer, but I didn't try to get even by sending him any telegrams. I really wanted to even the score with him, but I was afraid he'd go totally insane, and then who would do all the rewriting? Luckily for us, a wonderful man named Gene Kuhn had come aboard as producer-writer, and due to his fertile imagination and prodigious output, helped us make it through that first season. But what was more important, the show made it through too. Gene Kuhn himself didn't run out of steam until the middle of the second season, when he too had to take off for a rescuer. And to this day, I've always wondered what took him so long. So as we say in the film biz, lap dissolved. Here I stand after so many years, celebrating Star Trek and its creator, Gene Roddenberry, with you, our loyal and enthusiastic supporters. We, the remaining few survivors of the original group, are very proud. We're also wiser, gentler, and a hell of a lot older. Here it is, 1993, and the first Star Trek series is enjoying an unusually protracted afterlife. Star Trek The Next Generation recently wrapped its 1,000th episode. Deep Space Nine continues to lurk in its orbit within that television wormhole called syndication. And there seems to be no end in sight to the motion pictures sired in the aftermath of the original show and its ever-increasing progeny. In line with that, here's a bit of trivia for those trivia buffs amongst you. I'm probably the only living person in this room who has worked on both the original Star Trek and the Next Generation series. Who cares, you might ask? Well, I do. It's been an enriching experience. But now it's fast approaching time for me to go. Before I do, I'd like to recite a little poem I'm given to writing memories in my spare time. And this one goes as follows. An original thinker named Gene had a mind-blowing concept so keen. A new kind of show that for aeons would grow into a visionary, moralistic, pacifistic, terrificalistic, interplanetary, inner and outer space scene. I love writing limericks, and I wrote a few more for Gene's birthday party in 1986 when we were back together again, working on the first season of The Next Generation. Since you're a captive audience, you might as well listen up. Here's the first one. An executive producer named Gene said, I don't want you to think I'm unclean, because I only relate to a mixed tete-a-tete in an outer space warp speed sex scene. It took me 25 years, but with that limerick, I finally got even with him for all those cablegrams he sent me to Hawaii. Now to get a bit more serious, here's the other. There's someone of whom you've all heard, whose métier deals with the word. He rewrites scripts and then he rewrites them again. He is the intergalactic great bird. Back in 1966 or 67, I can't remember which, I christened Gene Roddenberry with a new name, the great bird of the galaxy. Yes, I confess I'm the culprit. I made the name up in one of my numerous memos when I threatened the Star Trek staff and crew that the great bird of the galaxy would deposit cosmic doo-doo upon them if they didn't try their best. And there was a very good reason for that name. Gene was, and always will be, the great bird of the galaxy. He made a difference. He not only changed the television medium, he changed the way people think and assured them that what they believe in can be accomplished. He changed the world. He gave us hope. In creating Star Trek, Gene created a society of the future for our future, a moral society that embodies the best attributes of humankind. With Star Trek, he gave us a vision of that future which contains no Armageddon, no cataclysmic end to civilization, but instead a better, more enlightened life for our children and their children's children. He said we're not perfect now, not by a long shot, but that we're better today than we were yesterday, and that we'll be even better tomorrow. Gene Roddenberry may have had his faults, and some of them were humdingers, but he was the most original thinker I have ever encountered, and the most gentle human being on planet Earth, this star system, or perhaps the rest of the universe. I'm grateful to have been his friend since that first day I met him back in 1964, and as I wanted to be for the next zillion light years or eternity, which I became last. I'm a macho kind of guy, but he's the only grown man I ever let kiss me, in public anyway. In his last few years, he kissed me a lot, and most of the time, I didn't get embarrassed at all, because I love him. Star Trek lives, and so do you, Bird. Live long and prosper out there in the firmament, or in some other, as yet unknown and unimagined dimension. Wherever you are, I hope it's like a producer's dream of a Hawaiian Hollywood heaven, but even better. A place where the sun shines every day when your show is out shooting on location, and it only rains at lunchtime or at night, or when you're shooting inside on the stage. Where you stop work early every day for office birthday parties, and you get to go home afterwards and it's still light out. Where your show is #1 in the ratings every week, and the critics are all crazy for it. Where the network's executives never, ever call except to say thanks and to renew early for next season. And its broadcast standards department still can't find anything to censor. Where the studio honchos want to increase your show's budget and can't wait to pay you more money. Where the actors don't want to know what you can do for them, but what they can do for you. Where all the writers' first draft scripts are not only delivered on time, but are legible, have no typos, and are so good they never need a rewrite. Where all the directors really like the show, understand the script, and give you lots of coverage. And where every episode is not only great entertainment, beautifully scored, tastefully done, and perfectly produced, but finishes both on schedule and under budget. I'll see you there. Thank you. I want you to pay close attention.
We'd all like to thank Bob for helping us experience the excitement, the humour and the friendship that helped create Star Trek. Don't think I've ever heard a speech I enjoyed as much.
Really?
Yes.
You haven't heard any speeches?
Two or three.
Oh.
Most of them. So let's give him another very big.
Thank you, fellow teachers. I really appreciate it.